Hello and welcome to day 3 of our mini masterclass on deployment communication. So excited to be here with you. I'm Lizanne, the seasoned spouse, and I'm the host of this masterclass. And today we are going to be focusing on communicating with kids about deployment. So I know not everyone in the group has kids, but it is a topic that comes up often enough that I wanted to make sure we took a day to address it here. So if you don't have kids, that's okay. We're going to have other discussions and opportunities for you to be involved throughout the day. But today's topic is all about communicating with kids during deployment. And I will let you know that our prize for today is a kid's book that's called Daddy Left with Mr. Army. This is a newly published book by a former service member, Chandel Walker, and she wanted to share the kids' perspective of watching a parent prepare for deployment and seeing all the emotions and all of the things that kids go through as they are preparing for deployment. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and that's going to be our prize giveaway. So please, by all means, join in the discussion, enter comments on this video. Feel free to participate throughout the day because that's what we want to focus on, is supporting our kids throughout deployment. Now you'll see behind me, I do have these prizes that we've been giving away throughout the week. And I will mention that we've already given away on day 1 this box set of 4 different books by Brenda Pace called Journey of a Military Wife. They are a great set of devotionals for different moments of military life, especially this one about deployment. So Faith was the winner of those. Congratulations to her. And then on day 2, which was yesterday, we awarded a bracelet. I know it's a little tricky to see here. This is a little bracelet that has the word grateful in Morse code, and it's invented by a military spouse company, which I thought was pretty cool. And then I have some soap that was handmade by another military spouse company. So I hope that that will be a fun and relaxing gift. Our winner was Crystal yesterday. So congratulations to our winners, and please keep on engaging with each other and commenting and providing insight. This has been a great week so far in this mini masterclass, and we want you all to keep on enjoying and benefiting and supporting each other. So our topic today is communicating with kids about deployment. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself first so you understand why this is such an important topic to me. I have 4 kids. And right now they are 10, 8, 7, and 4 years old. They are wonderful, but they are also sometimes a handful. And we have gone through 4 deployments together as a married couple with kids, which means that we've had, I had a newborn during one deployment. I gave birth a month after my husband had left, so I was on my own for the birth and for the baby's first 6 months. I've been through that stage. We've been through multiple deployments with toddlers and 3-year-olds and preschoolers. And now we've done, recently we just finished 2 deployments with school-age kids. So each stage had its own challenges. They're all difficult. They're all exhausting, but they kind of had different challenges at different stages of life. When I had babies and toddlers, life was very difficult during deployment. It was just, nonstop taking care of needy people that no one in the house could eat on their own unless I fed them. And that was a lot of responsibility. It was exhausting. And as they've gotten older, thankfully, they are able to eat and sleep and do things on their own, which is really refreshing. I promise you, moms, they do get older. You do get to that stage. But then as they go to school, you enter a whole range of emotional needs and more complicated reactions to deployment. So it's one thing to talk about preparing babies and toddlers for deployment. It's another situation entirely to talk about preparing school-age kids. And now I have not had middle schoolers and high schoolers during a deployment, and I'm aware that that is also an entirely different stage. And I do get a lot of questions about that sometimes in this group. I don't have personal experience with it, so I do invite parents of older kids to please share your questions and share your experiences, because we all are going to go through that at some point, and we need to know how to handle the challenges of having older kids deal with a parent's deployment. So if you've been there and you've been through that, please do share your experience. I know that some of the resources I'm going to share are for younger kids. There are unfortunately fewer resources and programs out there supporting older military kids. I think just because of the demographics of the military population, it is so common for military families to have babies and toddlers and preschoolers that there are numerous nonprofits who want to reach out and support families at that stage. But as you get to the middle schoolers and the high schoolers, a lot of service members have either left the military at that age, or they're nearing retirement, or I don't know, maybe they expect that families are more financially stable and should just be doing things on their own at that stage. So there's definitely a lack of resources for that older age group. And I'm aware of that. I try to gather the resources that I can find that will be supportive for those ages, but I'm always on the lookout for more. So if you have any ideas, please do share that with us today. So the first question that I get quite often when people have kids is, when do we tell them about deployment? And this really depends on the child's ages and also on what type of deployment scenarios they've been through before. So I think it is a little bit of a risk to tell kids too early. Time works differently for little ones than it does for us. And so an adult can prepare for something a few months in advance. And in fact, we often prefer a few months of notice to kind of get our affairs in order and get things ready. For kids, a few months is an eternity. So telling them in, say, the summer that dad is going to be deploying sometime in the fall or the winter, that's a very, very long time for them to be anxious and wondering and worrying and anticipating. So we usually wait until about the month of the deployment or a month before the deployment to tell little ones. That is an amount of time that they can process. You can look at one page of a calendar and start looking at the weeks of, we're up here and the deployment's going to start down here. You can do paper chain countdowns where, they rip off something each day, but kids do have a trouble understanding the passage of time. So I would caution you not to tell kids too early if it's just going to cause them undue stress and anxiety and kind of upset the family routines. You can be quietly preparing in the background and making your own preparations without really laying that stress on the kids. But at some point, everyone does need to communicate with the kids one way or another that their parent will be deploying. And again, it's very difficult to convey this to 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. They simply don't understand lengths of time. They don't understand geography. So saying something like, dad has to go to the Middle East for 6 months, that just goes right over a toddler's head. That doesn't mean anything to them. So again, we try to use as many visual cues and representations as we can. So again, sometimes I've used calendar pages to show the kids how many months it's going to be. We also count holidays because that's something that they do have a little bit of a grasp of. They know when their birthday is. They know that Christmas might be a really long time away, or Halloween. So we can try and place things in the year that way, that dad's leaving in the summertime and he won't be back until after Christmas, or that's just an example. So using those markers that kids will recognize, instead of saying 7 months, 10 months, or whatever, trying to use seasonal markers of birthdays and holidays and anniversaries, or things that are going to make a little bit more sense to kids. And that's why when I do have a printable countdown that you can put up on the wall and download from my website, and it can be customized for any length of deployment and for any branch. And it uses the months, but it uses symbols of holidays and celebrations for each month, because kids don't necessarily know what February means, but they do know about Valentine's Day. So there's a heart symbol next to February, and it talks about what we're going to do to celebrate that month and how many months we have left. And then there's a little service member, like a little silhouette of a service member, that you can move down the countdown. You can move them each month to mark off the time that is going. And so the child can see the amount of months that are left, and they can see that currently the service member is sitting right there in February. And then they can look at how much time is left, so they won't constantly be asking, when does dad come back? He's already been gone so long. How much longer is it going to be? So I do find that visual cues are really helpful for my kids. And also we try to use a map or a globe. They don't know countries, and that's okay, but you can show them that physical representation that we live over here and mom or dad is going to be deploying to over here, and they can see that there's an ocean in between, and they can see how far that is and get a grasp of that distance and understand that they won't be coming back and forth to visit, that it's going to be a very long time that they're separated. So the more that you can use those types of cues and language, that helps kids to understand what's going on. And it also reassures them a little bit that their parent is not disappearing off the world. They're going to a specific location. And I think it's important to talk a little bit about the language that we use when we are describing deployments to young kids. It's very tempting, and I hear this all the time, for people to say that the service member is going on a work trip or that they have to go away for work. And I understand that that is true. You're not wrong in saying that, but it can be very confusing to kids because they've probably seen their service member go away for work trips before when they had an overnight training in the field, or maybe they were gone for 3 days, or they were gone for a week. And so if you describe it as a work trip, then the child may be expecting that their service member parent is coming back in a week. So it also creates a lot of confusion if you go through the whole deployment saying that, and then the service member returns home. Well, within a few days of returning home, they have to go back to work. And that means the office on base down the road. But for a child, that can be really upsetting because they think that the parent is going to disappear again for a few months. So there's been a lot of examples of military kids kind of having these meltdowns because they don't understand the length of a work trip. So I do think it's important to use the word deployment, even with a toddler, even with a little one that can't understand what that means. At least it's a unique word, and it describes a unique situation so that once that deployment is over, you don't have to use that word anymore, and you can use other words to say dad is going down the street to work, or he's going to camp out in the field for 3 nights or something like that, and you're not bringing up that word deployment again. So using the correct terms, using deployment, even using the name of the country where they're going, I think is useful for helping kids to get a sense of what's happening and the fact that it's a unique situation. So we had our really little ones, even when they were 3 years old, if someone asked them, oh, where's your dad? They would say he was in Afghanistan because that was his Afghanistan deployment. And of course they had no clue what that really meant or where it actually was in the world, but they knew that he wasn't down the street at work. They knew that he was in Afghanistan and that he wasn't coming back for a long time. So things like that I think are useful for communicating with kids. I encourage you to use the correct terms, use the words deployment, use words to describe what your service member is doing in a positive way. I know it's really difficult to describe combat deployments to kids. We've been through a few of them. My husband's, he did 3 combat deployments before we were married, so at least I had experienced some of them. But then he did 2 more combat deployments when we had very young children. And in fact, our 3rd baby was born during one of them. So I had at one point a preschooler and a toddler and a newborn, and dad was in a combat zone in Afghanistan. Super difficult time. I don't wish that on anyone. And I think it's partly because of that trial by fire that I am so passionate about helping military families get through deployments today. So I had to find ways to talk to the preschooler and talk to the toddler about what their dad was doing and the type of work that he was doing. And of course we say that he's protecting us. We would say that he was fighting bad guys. We tried not to, of course, go into too many details about combat. And I also didn't share my own personal fears and stress of him being hurt with my kids because I didn't think that it was helpful to them in any way to be also anxious and stressing about that. So that was something that I had to kind of internalize, and I couldn't really share with the kids. I don't think it's healthy to share all of our adult concerns and burdens on very young children. Now, as your children get to be school-aged and middle school, totally different situation. They are very aware of the dangers of deployment. They have seen newsreels, they've seen movies, they know that people going into combat are fighting and being shot at and things like that. So as kids get older, they will ask those questions, and you do need to have discussions with them. And at that age, I think it's important to emphasize the amount of training that the service member has gone through, because your child has probably seen their deploying parent go off to training multiple times. They've seen them in uniform. They've seen the whole unit, maybe when they've visited the office or seen the platoon out drilling or something like that. So remind them of how much time the service member has spent working together with their team, training, preparing, learning what they needed to know to stay safe. The more that we remind our children and ourselves that the service members are trained for these missions, I think it takes a lot of the weight and the worry off of our shoulders, because we realize that they've done everything they can to prepare. And now we can trust that they have the equipment, they have the knowledge, they have the experience, and they have the support of this entire unit. They're not going solo, off to fight by themselves. So it's really important to use that type of term with your older kids and with your middle schoolers and high schoolers who might be seriously concerned for their parent, for their safety, for their well-being. And it's okay to talk to them about what would happen in the worst case scenario, the fact that the service member knows what they are getting into, they are prepared for it, it's a sacrifice that they have accepted, and that there are ways that the military and life insurance and things like that will take care of you. You're not going to be left suddenly, homeless and uncared for and alone if something happens to the service member. Older kids want to know those answers, and they will ask those questions. So it's important to have those conversations, as difficult as they may be. So we've talked about when to tell your child about deployment. We've talked about how to discuss deployment with them, using those terms and using those specific details. But now I want to talk about some of the resources that are out there for you and for your kid who may be going through an upcoming deployment, because there are tons of resources and programs and nonprofit organizations that want to support military families, especially those with young children. So I have a few resources that I'll be sharing with you throughout the day. In my deployment guide, I have an entire page of resources for military kids. These are all different programs and companies. A lot of them are free, some of them are paid, but I broke it up into a few different categories, so I'll go over those with you. First of all, there are things to do to talk to your kid about deployment. There's a really useful website that's run by Sesame Street and the USO, and I may be able to drop a link to that in the bottom afterwards. But it is Elmo and Big Bird and Cookie Monster talking to military kids about deployment. And it's really useful. It's videos, it's friendly, it's Sesame Street, but it's great. It's a great way to discuss deployment emotions and concerns with a really young child. So you can use that website resource. It is free. They have coloring pages that you can print out and some things that you can download. There are several programs through the YMCA. They have an after-school program for school-age kids that's called Operation Help a Hero. They offer free help with homework and discussions about deployment and discussions about managing stress and emotions, which is very important for kids at that age. They also offer the free quilts during deployment, which I've talked about before. You know what, I'm not going to read all of these to you because it's a very long list, but I promise I will post the list up later today. So there's lots of activities that you can do to engage with your kid and to help your kid through deployment. There's also a lot of things that you can buy to help them be reassured and calmed and ready for their parent to deploy. So there are things like the daddy dolls. There's bears from a military-owned company called Bear Regards, and they have bears in different service member uniforms, so you can find one that matches your deploying service member. And a lot of them come with those recordable voice chips, which I think is so important, that kids can hug their bear and hear their missing parent's voice. That is a great gift to give a child. You can do a similar thing at Build-A-Bear Workshop. They just don't have as many of the military uniforms, but the parent can go to Build-A-Bear ahead of time and record their voice and put it into the bear, which is just a great gift for a military kid. Anything that is pre-recorded, whether it's their voice or their image, is a treasure to military kids during deployment. So that's why I really love the program United Through Reading. That is a program that records the service member reading a book, and then they send both the book and the recording to the family so that kids can watch it anytime, which is great when you don't have those communication options with your spouse. It's nice to be able to just pop in. They either give it to you as a DVD or as a little USB drive for your computer. Just pop it in and play it anytime, and then you can have the service members, their image, their voice is right there for the kids so they don't have to feel disconnected. There's recordable books you can get from Hallmark. There's a lot of things that you can do just to save their image and their voice and keep it present for the child during the deployment. Honestly, I would just use my cell phone the week before he was leaving and make a bunch of tiny little videos of just everyday things. Him walking in the door, him playing with the kids or tickling someone, and sitting at the table eating dinner. And I didn't realize how much my 3-year-old would love those videos, but she watched them over and over and over again during the deployment. She was always asking to watch the movie of Daddy. So just those little everyday moments, whether it's a picture or a video, can be so important for kids. And it's important to grab those while you can before they deploy. So I will send out this list later today so that you can see some of the resources that are available for military kids. And let's see, what else did I want to talk to you about? We talked about when to talk about deployment, how to talk about deployment, and some of the resources that are available. So if you have questions for either a specific age group or a specific situation that you're dealing with, like I said, I've had every age from newborn to about 9 years old going through deployment, so I can answer questions in that range pretty well. If you have middle school or high school age kids, I can look up some more resources and maybe connect you to some additional information there. So I welcome your questions. I know how hard it is going through deployment with little ones and how stressful it is. So I want you to know that we are here to support you and to make that a little bit easier. Like I said, probably our most difficult deployment was 3 kids, ages 3 and under. And I had a lot of help. I did not do that on my own. I had help from family members and local friends and a variety of resources. But that is part of the reason that I have been so proactive in seeking out resources and support and help to get me through future deployments, because I learned that it's not something you can do alone. And just finding one local resource, when we discovered that the local USO offered story time on Tuesdays, it was a free event. They gave each kid that attended a little book. I think they even had some type of lunch that you purchased for really cheap, like $1 for a little bag lunch or something. And just being able to take my toddlers to that and get out of the house once a week and go to the USO, it was super appreciated. It was very helpful and supportive. So sometimes you just find that one resource that doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it takes some of that weight off of your shoulders, and it makes a big difference in your routines and in your ability to keep going day after day. So I hope that I can connect you with some of those resources that will make a difference for you. They are all over the country. I know we have tons of National Guard families in this group, and I'm aware that when you are away from a base, you have much fewer resources and much fewer opportunities. But I do want to focus on the ones that are available nationwide, because a lot of them, like the YMCA and the USO locations and some of these internet companies that you can order from anywhere, things like that, I want them to be available to you even if you're not living near a base. So please feel free to ask questions about specific age groups. And just as a reminder, we will be giving away this book called Daddy Left with Mr. Army. It is a beautifully written and illustrated book by a military spouse. Her name is Shendell Walker. and it's all about the child's perspective of deployment. And so this is based on not just her family's experience, but multiple military families that she has witnessed over the years, some of the challenges and the questions that military kids ask preparing for deployment. And I have found that reading books with the kids about deployment experiences can be a really great way to prepare them for deployment and to bring up those discussion questions, because they might not know what to ask or how to feel. But as they read somebody else's story in a book, they might feel safer discussing those characters or discussing what's happening with that family before they're asking questions and really expressing emotions about their own family. So I do encourage you to look up, I'm happy to give away this copy to one lucky family here, but there are tons of other books and resources for military families. And a really good company is Elva Risa, E-L-V-A-R-E-S-A. Elva Risa is a military specialty publishing company. And so they do have a wide variety of books. They're not all just for kids, but all of their military kid books are focused on military children. They have coloring books, activity books, books about deployment, books about PCS moves, all kinds of great stories that can help you to reach out to your kids and connect with them and have them discussing the deployment. So I'm happy to give this away. It's going to be based on a randomly selected participant in this video comment discussion. So please go ahead and join the discussion, ask questions, share your experiences. I'm excited to hear what has worked for your military kids, and I am here to offer support to everyone with a military child who is going through deployment. So thank you so much for joining me. This has been day 3 of our mini deployment masterclass. Now tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and that is part of the reason that we're having this mini masterclass this week, because I just wanted to share some love and share some prizes and share some fun with you on Valentine's Day. So please do tune in tomorrow on Valentine's Day. I'm going to be giving away several of these pampering, beautiful luxury gifts. We have a cute little jewelry box and some pampering lotions and a journal and things like that. So I want to share some prizes and some love with you tomorrow on Valentine's Day. And we will be discussing the topic of love languages. There are 5 love languages, and I'm going to talk about what that means for you and for your service member, especially when you are going through that long distance separation of a deployment. Ways to still feel loved and fulfilled and connected no matter what communication options you have during the deployment. So thank you so much for tuning in and watching this video. I hope that you'll tune in again tomorrow for our special Valentine's Day mini masterclass session, and I will see you then. Bye.